I want to bring onto the programme clinical psychologist Dr. Damien Wild, because I said, you know, I just want to play something that I said yesterday. It was almost portentous, quite harrowing, really. But I was warning against the danger of using rhetoric, potent rhetoric, at labelling and demonising opposition political forces with stringent terms such as Nazi and fascist. That was after John McDonnell labelled Nigel Farage a fascist. This is what I said 24 hours ago. I just want to say this, right? Lord Hermer and your cohort, there are people who are afraid in this country to show who they are and what they believe. And there are people who think they're going to be persecuted for their creed. There are people who are scared if they wear symbols of their belief. And those people might be from minority communities, but those people are also from the right wing of politics. Because people who backed Brexit dared not speak out for fear they might lose their jobs. People who might want to vote reform live in fear of being ostracised by their community and their family and their friends because of the way you portray them. The general public are frightened to write things on social media that might sound right-wing because they could end up in prison. And believe you me, politicians on the right wing of politics are very afraid of personal physical attacks against them when people like John McDonnell call them fascist. It's dangerous. Stop it. Well, little did I know that just a few hours later, evangelical Christian right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk was fatally shot in the neck. Damien, thank you for coming on the programme.
My pleasure, Alex.
We hear a lot of people describing the right wing as dog whistle, dog whistle. Well, when they talk about immigration, when they do this, it means that minority communities live in fear. What I don't think we have spoken about enough is when you have people on the left wing describing their political opponents with such potent terminology that suggests that they are actually an existential threat to society, such as fascists, that, in my opinion, this carries with it the risk that some deranged or impressionable character might take it upon themselves to feel they are duty-bound to act to prevent them. From a psychological point of view, is there any credence in that?
I mean, it's ironic, isn't it, that some people talk about the dangers of certain people who speak up when such an horrific crime has taken place and an absolute tragedy. I think media and social media and the internet has definitely exacerbated all of this, because you have people who simply, due to psychological issues in their own life, cannot sit with views that don't align with their own. And they're desperate to control the narrative. And then as part of this kind of bullying and sort of control perspective, which comes from media and governments, we see facets of this from, you know, the government here in the UK, is that they're trying to paint people in a certain light, and then it encourages people then to do certain things. I mean, recently we saw Graham Linehan, didn't they? You know, 5 armed policemen at the airport waiting for him just because he spoke up about trans ideology. It seems to be that anything goes these days. People can say whatever they like. And, you know, this is clearly inciting violence. And obviously, I think there's more to it at a psychological level for the perpetrator in the tragic Charlie Kirk case. And these people have got deep-seated psychological issues, but definitely the rhetoric which is being pushed heavily is an influencing factor. And it's a basic human right and a legal right to express how a person feels. That is not being protected.
What I can see happening increasingly is almost social hysteria. And to me, it tends to be on the left. When you look at some of these protests and people who go out in support of Extinction Rebellion or stand shouting about trans rights or Black Lives Matter, a lot of them look like they need an exorcism. I don't say that lightly to be comical. A lot of them are screeching, hysterical hysterically as if this is the most dangerous, critical, earth-ending situation, as if we're about to face a cataclysm. Black Lives Matter! You see them do this on the left wing, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on that we are generating these collective outpourings of what I can only describe as mass hysteria?
I think the views that they actually express are just surface level stuff. I think underneath these people, have psychological health problems. If you look at it at a small level, when people express their views online, sometimes people receive abuse, then it maybe extends to, people complaining to the workplaces, complaining to the police. Police are at the door. They're part of the problem. We know that from a lot of recent cases. And now it's got to such an extreme level, right, that people are committing violence, but not only committing violence, but are actually killing people. That is how extreme and frightening this is. I think at a psychological level, these people that you were just describing, they probably carry what we call narcissistic wounds in and amongst all of these debates. If they feel like they've lost a debate, or they feel like somebody's embarrassed them in an online debate or a public forum or in the media, is they just simply cannot handle not being right and not having control over something. So some people act in these extreme ways. And as I said, you get at the smaller end, the online abuse, complaints to various places. And right at the extreme top end, right, you've got people who are committing murder, right? But I said before that anything seems to go. I don't know if you saw it on X this morning, but there's a trans activist called Sophie Molly, and he tweeted out, Charlie Kirk, excuse the language, is a fascist cunt. Good riddance.
Gosh.
And that seems to be accepted. People are saying, "Oh, we're going to report this post, and there should be something done." And I think Graham Linehan commented on it and said, "Well, apparently I incite violence, but people can say things like that, and it seems to be accepted." So there's a normalization of that people can make threats and even carry out violence. And it's not a problem because, oh, hey ho, Charlie Kirk, he had some outrageous views.
But it seems to me his views were not outrageous. That is what I find the most ridiculous thing. To me, Charlie Kirk seemed to be somebody who was actually standing up against what should be considered dangerous and controversial. The sort of people, the sort of views that those who have narcissistic wounds, it's not the first time that connection has been made, are drawn to. Well, I want to bring you into this because, Dr. Wilde there, and I must point out, he was directly quoting a post that was put up on social media when he alluded to the rhyming slang for Jeremy Hunt there. But Dr. Wilde there is pointing out that actually this does then pose a security threat when there is this painting, where there is this creation of this image that political opponent is actually a direct danger. Because when people say fascist, you were talking about a character who wants to enslave, imprison, even murder, oppress the population. That actually encourages people to feel like when they dislike this person, they are so dangerous, they are so hateful that they must be stopped by any means.
Yeah, I mean, Damien made some very good points. I can't disagree with everything. I can't disagree with anything that he says. Something that we deal with in the security world, and particularly in the personal protection world, is what we call fixated people. And fixated people can go from the very ardent fan of whoever that person in the public eye may be, through to their arch nemesis, or what they perceive to be their arch nemesis. So although not in a clinical sense like Damien, we have to deal with psychology and the planning around the psychology of the motivations of particular attackers. What is driving them forward? Now, in certain cases, like stalkers, for example, it can be an entirely irrational element, and particularly when it is a non-associatable sort of stalker. So i.e. it's not a former partner who's feeling aggrieved by the end of a relationship. It's someone who has this, you know, people have made jokes about it, that celebrity talks to them through the TV, and that they believe that they have a relationship. And I've worked against people like that many a time. But what we're seeing now, and I'd love Damien's take on this, is almost an expansion of this one person in terms of their fixation on one person to a fixation on an ideology or a fixation on a narrative or in a particular story. And I don't see a massive leap between the two, because you have these individuals that literally are so void of any critical thinking. They're void of any ability to rationalize and say, you know what, maybe something that's escaped them is a thing called devil's advocate, where they may have that very strong belief system, but ultimately they could say, okay, let me step back from myself. Let me look at this objectively. Let me try and understand the other person's perspective. But the problem that we're dealing with, and I've dealt with this with various protest groups, of which you may have mentioned some, where we have intercepted them in terms of their plans, their agenda, their plots that they've tried to obviously undertake, that they are so, and like you said, they're barking mad, they scream, they shout, there's spittle constantly coming out of their mouths in terms of what they're trying to get across. And it's almost like dealing with a petulant toddler who is throwing a tantrum. There's no reasoning with the toddler, because the toddler hasn't the ability to communicate why they're screaming, shouting, stamping their foot and hitting everything within sort of arm's reach.
Yeah, Damien, it is an interesting comparison to draw this idea of people who are fixated, and I wonder whether a big contributing factor of this, something that augments that obsessive fixation, is the heightening, exacerbating aspect of social media and people in echo chambers and people constantly looking at content that, due to algorithms, tends to be a lot more extreme, to catch the attention, to get the views, to provoke a response, because that actually directly leads to clicks, which for a lot of people earns a lot of money.
Yeah, I would say the internet definitely exacerbates this extremism which we're seeing, because think about it, you know, before the age of the internet, people might run down the pub, have a disagreement, and then 5 minutes later they've forgotten about it. Of course, yeah, horrific crimes still did occur, but what we're seeing is we're seeing all these nuances at play, and we're seeing a lot of extreme acts being carried out, and where I don't think they're being taken seriously. Maybe Charlie Kirk tragedy, hopefully, will put things at the forefront more so that people can actually pay attention to this. And this is about protecting the public, because on the other side, they talk about, oh, well, we dislike this policy and we dislike this view being aired, right? And, you know, they talk about the dangers to people. Well, you know, somebody, you know, on that side of things has gone and committed the most extreme act. And, yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because 2 attempts were made on Donald Trump to assassinate him. Yeah. And maybe it's like certain people are so desperate to control the narrative, right, and to do something, is that they've gone for somebody else within sort of, you know, conservative kind of leanings. And what's also interesting is that, you know, in Utah, this was the first sort of tour. It was going to be a nationwide campus tour where there were dates all over the country. And this perpetrator has gone for the very first debate, the first time that he appeared on this tour. And I think we need to wise up and be more sensible and look at the psychological nuances and this kind of growing sort of bullying culture. And you're right, they do congregate online. It gives them a platform. They go on certain social media platforms or certain forums, and they know like-minded people will come in. And there is no talking to these people. There is no, you can't reason or use logic with these people, because we talked then about that they have tunnel thinking. They're rigid, they're obsessive. They've clearly had difficult upbringings and got various kind of, insecurities in their life. But they are a danger, and something does need to be done, because this tragedy should not be repeated, and people should be able to air the views that they want to view.
I couldn't agree more. Listen, thank you, Dr. Wild. Thank you ever so much in giving us that view from a clinical psychological standpoint.